Hi, I'm John Schultz. About 15 years ago, I created a simulator called Amazing Curves Racing, which features bicubic Bezier curved surfaces for the track. This is a unique experience as the physics engine also operates on curves versus polygons. Displacement mapping is used to provide bumpiness where needed. I was curious how it would compare to a modern racing game such as Forza Horizon, which I recently purchased. I've played it on the Xbox Series X and will do a comparison on a high-powered PC with a GTX 1080 and see how it looks compared to this 15-year-old game that I wrote by myself. I built this hardware a few years ago to edit 4K video. Here's Forza Horizon 5, which takes a long time to load even with an NVMe drive. And there's all this extra. You have to drive to the track, then enter the track. There's quite a bit of waiting before you can actually go racing. So I'm driving all out. Never driven this track before, haven't played this game that much. Not trying to be a friendly online racer. I'm going to run into a lot of things which will show us the physics, and we'll do the same thing in Amazing Curves. First thing I noticed with Forza is the motion of the car looks like it's on rails. It doesn't really feel like I'm driving a car. The joystick input is very, molasses is the way I would describe it. It's very slow and damped, and so your driving style is based on that very slow input. So you gotta pre-think what you're gonna do very early before you do it, because it's just not gonna react very quickly. There's videos online where people are playing with keyboard and winning against people using wheels and things, and that just kind of tells you what's going on. So here I am close to the back, 9th out of 12, and I get a little bit better as we go on. Overall, the graphics are pretty. A lot of work went into this. It's very impressive. The sounds are really cool. They're well done. One thing that I did notice from prior simulators, especially 15 years ago, is there wasn't a lot of simulation of the engine and drivetrain and the wheels and things like that. How do I know? Because you look at the tack. When your tack is modeled off of that physics pipeline I just described, from the engine to the drive shaft to the differential to the wheels and the rubber, you'll see the tack jiggle around. And when you hit the rev limiter, you'll also see appropriate behavior of the tack when you're doing spark cut or fuel cut or both, depends on the car. So pulled off a second, first time on that track. That was pretty fun. But again, it didn't really feel like I was running a racing simulator. It felt more like an arcade game. And now we'll do the replay in external view. So the sounds that you get when you shift, where you hear that pitch drop as it goes into each gear, you'll hear that as well in Amazing Curves, but I don't directly simulate that sound change. The sound engine runs separately, and based on the physics load, that causes those pitch changes in Amazing Curves. I don't know how they're doing it here, but I could see them doing it either, it's canned, or it's possible they're doing a full drivetrain simulation, and it's also a byproduct of the physics and not a canned sound effect. Now on the popping, you notice between shifts on these cars they pop and backfire. There's another vehicle that we'll review later that I've actually tuned out the popping in the car's software. This is a real car I'm referring to. So the collisions, just the whole thing just feels very arcade to it. It's very flat too. There's very little elevation and banking in the game. There are some tracks that have slight banking, but generally speaking, it's extremely flat. And you can see the car body wobble around a little bit. So maybe they are doing some modeling that simulates a slightly bumpy road if it's not just polygon artifacts intersecting polygon discontinuities. But the camera inside the car appears to have an extra level of damping, and this goes away. You don't see that subtle motion, which adds to realism. So the only thing that really takes time on loading tracks is they're compressed. Played this in a while, so it takes a little bit of time before I get into it. And lots of curvature here. The curbs have a discontinuous join, so it's an abrupt change. This is off-road, so it's bumpier. This Formula style car has a lot of downforce. You can pretty much drive all out, 100% throttle the entire track. In fact, there's enough downforce that this car would stick on a track that was upside down. And I have a track like that somewhere that I can dig up and show. It's kind of fun driving upside down, realistically. Notice how quick you can move the wheel or the stick. It's the same Xbox joystick. And the car reacts as I would expect. The only aid that's turned on in this demo is the anti-flip over code, which at this point right here, when the car gets airborne, typically when it lands, it flips over, and that code is enabled to prevent that from happening because it's not fun. But the downforce becomes lift when it comes off that rise at the start, and that's why it floats for a bit. And that's using a custom computational flow dynamics model that was originally done for the first virtual reality game that I wrote back in the 90s, VR Slingshot. This engine sound came from that 2002 Z06 C5. And it's pretty cool that the sound that's been de-pitched in terms of rising scale to play back as a sound effect from the real engine can scale all the way up to almost 12,000 RPMs and still sound pretty decent, like a Formula One kind of a sound. But it's the same sample for the whole thing. It's all I had time and budget to do. And as mentioned before, it's a complete engine drivetrain wheel model simulation. So watch the tack as we drive around the track, get into collisions, hit the curb, go on rises, suspension, relief, and compression. You'll see the tack jiggle around. That was a good example right there. The current torque model is pretty flat, closer to an electric motor than internal combustion, just to get it done without having another lookup table. When I originally wrote this, I could obviously change that. It's without much torque, it's pretty squirrely. just like our real car. And the LS7 in modern Corvettes is very similar down low. It's got a lot of torque. Or the C7 with a blower. So even with simple graphics that date back to 2001, the feeling of speed is pretty good. We don't have any motion blur going on here. It's just 100 frames per second. And technically 60 frames rendered on the display. So what's next? Well, in 2002, I was driving a C5 Z06, and last year in March, I picked up one of these. So, depending on feedback of this video, I might resurrect Amazing Curves. It's a bit of work. I need to rewrite the user interface. I need to clean up the code and figure out a way to create content more quickly. It previously used 3D Studio Max and a custom exporter. That might still work. I haven't fired it up in a while. Maybe I'll need to create a tool to create tracks using Bezier curves. That would be a lot faster, maybe even an automated way to do that. Please let me know in the comments below if you'd like to see Amazing Curves Racing come back, and any comments regarding what you'd like to see, what you'd like to see emphasized, what you'd like to see in terms of playability, controls, anything you can think of. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to hearing from you.